Hey, Pat Brown, you flew to Central Florida recently just so you could hang out with me. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, that's
And and
correct.
and what kind of an airplane were you flying?
My Comanche, of course.
And it didn't work out the way you planned, did it?
Not quite.
Let's talk about it. I should
Mm,
probably have something to say, don't you think?
you might help.
You assumed you were working with a professional.
No, I've known better than that for years.
Pat, I'm happy to say we got the opportunity to see each other in person a couple weeks ago back at Sun and Fun, and we were able to compete thanks to the wonderful people at Gold Seal Online Ground School, a fine institution and a good service. But
Absolutely.
they put us into I don't want to call it a cage match, but it was incredibly divisive. There was great tension in the air. And I think we even have some photographic proof of how it went. It was a trivia game, and you very unceremoniously won the first round, which I was a little upset about.
Yeah, well, not just the first round.
I did win the second game. There's
Yes, you did.
photographic evidence. I
Yeah.
did actually triumph once, but yeah, in the tiebreaker, um, Pat Brown beat the crap out of me.
Well, and the animosity runs deep, I can tell.
And you came away with a lovely parting gift, didn't you? I mean, you got a
No,
nice
that is
prize
I've
out of
already
that.
shown it, but that is it. The lovely fanny pack right here, and it's still got some things in it. So I'm grateful.
Outstanding. Well, big thanks to Russ Still and the folks at Gold
Yeah.
Seal Online Ground School. That really was fun. I enjoyed it. And if you get a chance to be at one of the events they're at, jump in on that. It's an interesting experience. And what I thought was going to be a fairly simple, high level game actually required me to think a little bit.
Yeah, it required both of us to think a little bit, and neither one of us got all of them right. It was fun, actually.
Yeah, there was some great stuff there. But since we're mentioning us being together, and we were in person, there's photographic evidence of that too. There's prior videos on this channel. But you actually had a challenge on your way from Houston to Kissimmee, Florida, the tourism capital of the world. There
Yeah.
was a moment where something happened that sort of caught your attention. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Well, the day started out interestingly because the weather wasn't great here. It was 1,500 foot broken, something like that, maybe 4 or 5 miles visibility, if that, enough that we filed to get out. And
So
the
you're
trip,
flying IFR.
yeah, we're IFR. The first stop was Pascagoula, Mississippi at Trent Lot. There's a terrific FBO there, Southern Sky, and there's a little restaurant attached to it and a couple of little old ladies that cook great food from scratch. And it's just awesome. It's been our go-to stop every year for the last several years. And the weather wasn't great. It was supposed to clear, but the weather wasn't great there either. So we had to fly an approach to get in and finally get out. So we're IFR and I don't know, maybe in and out of the clouds. It wasn't solid, it wasn't hard IFR, but we were in and out of the clouds. And we got kind of parallel or a beam, I guess you'd say, Panama City. And we had a guy in the back seat, and my partner who was flying in the left seat turned around to say something to him. And all of a sudden, from this kind of dull roar that the engine normally makes, it just sounded like this high pitched squeal, scream almost. I thought my partner had hit one of the controls with his knee, but I looked at the RPMs and they had spiked at like 3,200 RPMs. Well, the red line on that airplane is 27, and boy, it got that. I got our attention quick, as you might imagine. So
Oh yeah, that
he
would certainly get my head turned around. And hey, that's not right. And
that's
not only
bad.
is that not right, that's potentially really bad.
That's potentially really, really bad. But and it's funny how kind of instinct kicks in. He reached over and pulled the throttle back to idle, and I simultaneously reached over and pulled the prop lever back to full course. And just as quickly as it happened, the RPMs retarded back to about 2,200. So now, what are we going to do? What's just happened? And all this happens. I mean, it's happening that quickly. Um, but I reached over, and I think this is the chronology of what happened because again, things were happening so quickly. Um, One of us, I think it was me, reached over to the throttle and began pushing the throttle back up to see if that did anything to the prop RPM. And at full throttle at 7,000 feet, all we're going to get on that non-turbocharged engine is 22 inches, and that's what it went. What the manifold pressure went back up to 22 inches, and the prop RPM stayed at 2,200. So next, one of us, again, I think it was me, but I don't really remember that clearly. One of us reached to the prop lever and began to move it slowly back and forth to see if there was any change in the prop RPM. None. So at that point, we're both thinking we've got a governor issue here that was precipitated by a propeller overspeed. And now the thing that was strange about it is that my understanding of the way a constant speed prop in a single engine airplane works is that if you have a governor issue, the prop defaults to full flat pitch, whereas in a twin it defaults to a feather. And so we're both trying to, and again, this is happening in seconds.
Yeah, yeah, this is
We're
very quick. A lot
yeah,
going on all at once in your
yeah,
head and on the quadrant.
yeah. So we're trying to figure, well, what's going on here because it should be, it should the propeller should be going faster than 2,200 RPMs, and we should have to pull the throttle back to slow it down, and that's not happening. So the next step is, all right, let's look at the engine monitor. Everything was almost perfectly straight, like you draw a ruler across it, which is unusual in a basically a you know a air, without gammy injectors. It's a little bit unusual, but they were just straight as could be, and nothing spiking, nothing missing on the engine parameters. We looked at the oil pressure. The oil pressure was good. Oil temp was good. In other words, all the parameters that we looked at indicated the engine is running just fine, but we can't control the propeller. Well, I think it's North Beaches, the
Northwest Beaches. Yeah, Panama
Northwest
City is
Beaches, yeah,
called now it's called Northwest Beaches.
yeah, ECP, I think is what it is. And we were probably 5 miles offshore at 7,000 feet, kind of in and out of the clouds, but broken conditions. And looked off the left wing, and there is Northwest Beaches Airport. And so we decided very quickly we need to divert. So
I was going to ask how long would you say that process was from discovering the problem to realizing diversion is the thing to do? Because you're probably 300 miles or so from your destination.
yeah, and I will acknowledge the fact that for a moment, for a very brief moment, it went through my head, should we continue on to our destination so that we can get the problem fixed? But I'm telling you, that was that left my brain about as quick as it came in because it was clear. Well, first of all, from a practical standpoint, there's not much between Panama City and Kissimmee in terms of airports that might have some maintenance on the field. So
And
from a
it's worth
practical,
pointing out, Panama City, Northwest Beaches is an international airport, a big runway, single runway, but it's big.
yeah,
And there are services there. You're right. There's not a lot between there and when you get down into the greater Orlando area because, well, that's called the Nature Coast for a reason. There's just not much there.
yeah, there's a bunch of little airports. They're all non-towered for the most part. And, again, not really sure what level of services they may have there. And there's really no time to go into ForeFlight or any of the other resources and check and see for maintenance shops. But North West Beach is a Delta airport with, I think, a 10,000 foot long runway.
Hmm.
And so it made sense to divert there because more than likely they would have fuel on the field.
Now, let me ask you a devil's advocate question. You're flying right now. You've had an overspeed. You got it under control. Now you're flying at about 22 squared, 22 inches and 2200 RPMs.
Right, right.
Life is good like that. But the risk of another overspeed is that that prop is connected directly to the crank. If you go back up to 3200 RPM and you're not sure whether it will or not, that can tear the engine apart. On the flip side, at 2200 RPM, a go round's not going to be very pretty.
No, that's all of those things are right. And we also didn't know, let's assuming that it was the governor, we also didn't know what caused the failure. Could it be an oil leak? Um, and even though right now the temps and pressures look good, do we want to risk that for another 200 miles?
And just to illustrate that for folks who might not be familiar, the way that variable pitch propeller works is a struggle between oil pressure and spring tension. So you're right. If you got an oil leak, well, eventually you're going to run out of that side of the equation.
Exactly, and because it's oil it comes from the engine. Eventually, you're going to run the engine out of oil too. So, um,
So lots
and
of bad things going through your head.
yeah,
The only good thing being we have a 10,000-foot runway right there.
yeah. So we were a couple of miles offshore, easy gliding distance with the gear up, easy gliding distance to the airport if something catastrophic had happened. So Dave called ATC and said we need to divert to ECP, and of course their response was, why? We've got a little bit of an engine issue here, and boy, that got their attention. And they said, "Do you need to declare an emergency?" And Dave said, "Not at the moment. Everything seems to be okay for the moment, but we do need to land." And
ATC reacts really well to that. I don't think people who haven't had this situation realize that is their role to provide the assistance we need when we need it. They perk right up and give you priority handling.
yeah, the only thing I think that I would have done differently in that regard would have been to say, "Yeah, let's declare an emergency," because it could have turned into one very, very easily. And this is in hindsight now. We probably should have gone ahead and just declared the emergency. It wouldn't have changed anything with the way ultimately the way it was handled, because they gave us priority handling. The tower held ups and departures until we were on the ground. They rolled the equipment. It's pretty cool to see fire trucks waiting for you to land. It was scary in a little way, but comforting in another.
And probably worth pointing out, Pat, that if you declare an emergency, and there have been a number of unfortunate accidents, even fatalities, where people were reticent to declare an emergency when they really should have.
Right.
Nobody's coming after you about that. They just want an
No.
explanation of why. But
Yeah, if they even ask that,
mm,
when all the dust settles, even they may not even ask that. They, being the FAA, may not even ask that. They might, but oftentimes they don't even ask that. Once the emergency is resolved, nobody gets hurt, no damage or anything like that. It's just okay. That's over. Let's go on to the next thing. Um, but they handed us off the tower, and several times the tower checked in, "How we doing?" And because we were so high, we actually had to circle the airport several times to lose enough altitude. We entered the left downwind on what I guess would be called a high key position. We were about 1,500 feet on the downwind leg, AGL, as opposed to the normal 1,000 feet. But our reasoning, my partner's reasoning, he was flying the airplane, I totally agreed with him, is we got 10,000 feet of runway. There's no excuse for us to be short.
hmm
So,
yeah.
so basically, we turned base at about 1,000 feet, and then by that time the gear was out, the flaps were out, and it was a nice about a midfield touchdown, give or take. And so we still had about 5,000 feet left in front of us. The maintenance shop, and by the way, while he was getting ready to land the airplane, I was looking for a maintenance shop on the field. ForeFlight has that feature where you can see what is there.
Wait a minute. You're saying you guys were using cockpit resource management during a challenging experience?
Of course, we are professional. Well,
I like no, I think that's a great point. Dave's flying the airplane. You're free to look up other information. So when they ask you, where are you going? You know.
so yeah, so we touched down, and they just told us to get off the runway as soon it was as practical. They were not trying to rush us in any way, shape, or form. And so we got off on the first taxiway that we could, so we could clear the runway for some commercial departures that they were holding some jets for us, which I was grateful for. And they switched us over to ground. They asked us where we wanted to go, and I had found a maintenance shop that looked like it would. There's two on the field, but the one that we chose looked like it might be the better of the two, just in terms of the services that they listed that they offered. And we taxied up to the maintenance with the fire trucks right behind us, and got out of the airplane. Um, One of the mechanics walked out and greeted us, nicely and warmly, and what's going on. And before long, the maintenance shop, Eagle. Oh geez, I should remember this because they were so good. Eagle's Nest, I think
I
is
think
what
we've
it is.
got a picture of that crew in their office
Yes.
along with your partner Dave. And sounds like they did do a great job of getting you turned around very quickly.
Yeah, Mike Hall is the father. Matt Hall is his son. There's another son involved, but he didn't work on the airplane. And Mike's wife is the president of the company, and his daughter is the parts manager. So it's a family owned maintenance shop. And they literally dropped everything to come out and see what they could do to help. They called prop shops all over the country. They called all kinds of places because after a little diagnosing, they concluded that in fact it was more than likely the governor. But long story made short, they found a governor somewhere, brand new, off the shelf. They had it there by 8 o'clock the next morning, and by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we were back in the air, and we landed in Kissimmee 24 hours, almost to the minute, 24 hours late. But we got there, and with the help of an incredible family of mechanics and an awesome FBO there, Southern Sky, which happens to be the only other FBO that this company owns was in Pascagoula. So we landed at both of their FBOs in one day. They did such a good job for us. I made sure I actually wrote a letter to the president of the company when we got back from Sun and Fun, telling them about the experience and asking him to pass along our appreciation to, because they're in Alabama, the home office is in Alabama, to pass our thanks on to the one in both locations. And I got a nice reply back from him.
That is excellent. And of course, you talked about you had to file IFR to get out of Houston. That weather is marching eastward while you're on the ground in Panama City. Had you been on the ground 4 or 5 hours longer, you'd still have been there, wouldn't you?
Yeah, we beat that weather out, and I don't want to make it sound like we did anything that was, I'd say, of questionable judgment. We were watching this very, very carefully and watching the winds and things like that. And we both felt very comfortable that we could get out of there with a good couple of hours to spare before the leading edge of that weather got to us. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. By the time we landed in Kissimmee, about 2-ish hours later, when I looked at the weather, the leading edge of the red and purple was over Pascagoula. So we got out with plenty of time to spare. And if not, we would have just waited there until probably Friday morning, because it was gorgeous, as I recall now. I've slept since then. It was gorgeous on Friday in Kissimmee and Lakeland.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think you did really well, and this is a real world example of you're on a flight in an airplane you're familiar with, and you fly often. You're flying with a partner who's also familiar with the airplane. Everything's going great until it's not.
Yeah.
and you have to evaluate the situation and make a decision. It sounds like you made a really great one. We have a terrific diversion. We're already talking to ATC. Let's just accept we have a problem, get on the ground and fix it. Even if it inconveniences us and we do miss sun and fun, which is not anybody's primary goal, but as you say, let's not fly another 300 or so miles with a potential oil leak, a probable governor problem. There's a lot of places you don't want to go down in that area. Sounds like
Yeah.
you guys just made great decisions and lived up to the old adage, have credit card, will travel.
Let me tell you something. Thank goodness for that credit card because we had to rent a car and we had to secure a hotel. The FBO, the shop actually called the FBO who came to pick us up in a golf cart. They had a car ready for us, and they said there's a hotel less than a mile down the street. It was 2 years old. So, and so, all right, well, we've got a car, we've got the hotel, we've got a credit card. We're getting hungry. Let's go eat. So we ended up on the beach, and what could have been a really really unpleasant experience actually turned out to be just another chapter in the book I'm going to write one of these days about my flying adventures, and an interesting story to tell with, I hope, some good takeaways from for people that might hear us talking today.
Well, I appreciate you sharing the story. Some people don't want to talk about the issues they've had, but I think they're instructive to other people because we all run the risk of having some type of issue. This is a great example of a firsthand literal issue, how we dealt with it, and the fact that the inconvenience, while it is inconvenience, really isn't that bad, especially when you compare it to the possibility of what would have happened had you continued on and it had been an oil leak.
Both of us would, want to live to be able to go to Sun and Fun next year and Oshkosh, in another couple of months.
Yeah.
So it was the right decision to make, and it's amazing to me because I've had over almost 12,000 hours of flying. Really, just a couple of instances where I've been uncomfortable in an airplane. But it's really interesting that while you may struggle momentarily with what to do, and it's seconds, it's not minutes and minutes. Usually, it feels that way, but it's seconds. Once you make the decision that this is my course of action, all of a sudden there's this sounds almost zen like. I don't know, but there's almost a peace that kind of comes across you, that okay, and I know what I'm going to do, and this is the right thing to do. And even though you may struggle to get there for a minute or seconds, eventually when you make that decision, that's the right decision, and you're at peace with it.
Well, and I hate to sound trite about this, but it really does come down to training, actively managing the airplane and flying. So when the bad thing happens, whatever that is, that's not the first time you've thought about how do I deal with this.
Right, right. So all in all, it was an interesting experience. It resulted in another story to tell, and hopefully people, folks watching this, will get something out of it, and take the object lesson for whatever it's worth.
Outstanding. Pat, I thank you for sharing the story. I'm glad I got to see you on the ground in Lakeland, Florida. We will
Likewise.
get together again, hopefully not a whole year from now, but it's possible. Until then, I hope everybody watching goes ahead and clicks the likes button because I like that story. It was worth it. Share the video on social media so your friends know how to deal with issues like this. And of course, subscribe to the channel because look at that Pat Brown face. Doesn't he deserve a subscription?
I'm speechless.
Hey, thanks a lot, Pat. I will see you next time, buddy.
All right, adios, bud.